Dr. Craig. We're really sorry for the
Hello, Dr.
inconvenience.
Craig.
Hello. All right, Michael, I'll let you go.
Okay.
Bye.
Yeah,
Allow
we're
me
really sorry
to,
for the inconvenience.
yes, let me move back to my desk and I'll get set up.
Oh, okay.
Okay,
Okay.
let's see now. I cannot see myself, so I don't know how I look.
Can you put a bit down your camera? Okay,
Like
it's all
this?
good. It's all good. Yeah.
That's better?
Yeah, that's
Better.
better. Yeah.
Okay.
Okay. We thank you a lot for your willingness. We're really sorry for the technical issues. There's some raining and other stuff. So yeah, we're really grateful for your willingness. Thanks a lot, Dr. Craig.
Sure.
Yeah. Okay. So I just start record, and I think we will play it relay because here in Indonesia it's still 3 a.m. in the morning. So yeah, I don't think no one is here. So it's okay.
Okay.
Okay. So okay. First, let me introduce yourself. Yeah, Dr. Craig.
You want me to introduce myself, or
I
you're
will.
going to?
I will.
You
I
will.
will.
Okay.
Yeah, I will. Okay. So, okay, everyone. We're really grateful for today opportunity to have Dr. Craig here in Schole ID. Schole ID is a public philosophy hub. We want to make philosophy more accessible for any layman who don't learn philosophy academically, who want to learn philosophy uh, independently, and we want to make philosophy more accessible to the public sphere. And just like what we always do, we have invite some of the greatest thinker, such as we have Christian Miller back then, we have Stephen Lau, and then we soon have Dr. Philip Goff, and we're really grateful today that we have Dr. William Craig, the founder of the Reasonable Faith, some apologetical ministry, and also some, I could say, a philosophical, some philosophical foundation also. And he writes so many books, and some of it that I have read also on Guard. Uh, uh, and we want to discuss today's book called Reasonable Faith. And I think that's your magnum opus. Is it right, Dr. Craig?
Well, I would prefer to call it my signature book. It's not really my greatest work, no, but it is the book for which I'm most well known.
I see. Okay, so yeah, we will discuss Reasonable Faith today's discussion. Okay, Dr. Craig, thank you for your willingness to come here.
Certainly.
Maybe we just jump up to the questions. It's okay, yeah. First questions. What is philosophy for you, and how could you come up with philosophy in your life, and what is your moment which make you so certain that philosophy is the discipline that you will spend your time, maybe your whole life?
Yes. Philosophy, I think, has best been defined by the great American philosopher Alvin Plantinga as simply thinking hard about something. If you really think hard about a subject, you are philosophizing about it. And my interest in philosophy was born in college when I took a course called Conflicts in Biblical Christianity. And in this class, I read a book by Edward John Carnell on Christian apologetics. And Carnell was raising and addressing questions that I had, like, what is the nature of truth? how do you test for truth? Is Christianity true? And I was absolutely captivated by his discussion of these questions. So after graduating, I pursued a master's degree in philosophy of religion. And it was there that I really got hooked and realized that these questions were so interesting that I really wanted to spend my life's career working on them.
I see. So it's what your college year that makes you into philosophy, and you took your master in philosophy.
Yes.
Okay.
Yes. So I'm something of a late bloomer, actually, when it comes to philosophy. It wasn't until I was an upperclassman in college that I really began to get interested.
So what you took before you took a master in philosophy?
What did I do?
Yeah.
Well, I participated in 8 years of high school and intercollegiate debate activities. And academic debate is a sort of intellectual sport. I have no athletic ability, but I could compete for my schools on the debate circuit. And so we debated the best universities all over the United States on subjects of public policy, like the military assistance program or the power of the executive branch of the government and so forth. And I spent more time researching the debate topic each year than I did on all the rest of my classes. And so I figured I might as well get credit for all of this work. And so I majored in speech and communications in college.
I see. Okay. Do you still remember the first philosophical text that you ever read?
Gosh. No, I don't. It would have been my freshman year in college. I had a course called Introduction to Philosophy with Stuart Hackett. And your colleague, he wasn't a very good teacher. He didn't manage to make philosophy really interesting. And so it wasn't until a couple years later, as I say, taking this other class, that I discovered how really, really interesting philosophy could be. But that initial class, I think we read a book by E.A. Burt in that class, which was something of a classic, but I remember almost nothing else in terms of what we did that freshman year.
I see. Okay. Yeah. Dr. Craig, I forgot to ask you, can you share a bit what you do in Reasonable Faith, your ministry?
Yeah. Yes. About 10 years ago, I became rather frustrated with the fact that although I had been working hard for many decades, it seemed like everything I did was sort of done in a corner and wasn't having a very broad impact. And so I thought, how can we broaden the impact of what I do? And talking with a consultant named Kurt Swindoll, he said, what you need to do is go on the internet and develop a web-based nonprofit organization that would disseminate your material worldwide through the internet. And so that was what we did. And it has been a dream come true. We are now getting literally millions of views or interactions every month through our various internet activities, whether our YouTube channels, our Facebook page, our website, our several podcasts. It's just been wonderful to see the way this material has touched people all over the world, even in Indonesia.
Yeah, one of it is me.
Good.
Yeah, you really helped me through my college years, like questions of Big Bang, evolutions. I think that when you become a Christian, you must reject all of it. And yeah, when I look at your video, it's really helped me throughout my college year. Thank you a lot,
good.
Dr. Craig. Now, yeah, let us jump to the questions about your book, Dr. Craig.
Yes.
Talk about the title of your book. how could two terms that most people think are so different, faith and reasonableness, combine into one? Reasonable faith. It's
Yes.
not that we understand. It's not that we understand faith as even if I don't see, I'll believe. What do you mean when you write the faith is possible to make sense? Don't people say that faith means believing without seeing?
Well, this is funny because the title Reasonable Faith was not my preferred title for the book. It was the publisher who said, let's call your book Reasonable Faith. And I thought, oh, what a boring, dull, uninteresting title. And I had no idea how controversial those two words put together would sound to some people. I just took it for granted that you could have a reasonable faith. But it turns out in many people's thinking that this is an oxymoron, that faith cannot be reasonable. And what I mean by reasonable faith is that trusting in God, and specifically in the Christian God, is something that is logically consistent and coherent, and that it fits the facts of experience. And that therefore having faith in the Christian God is a perfectly reasonable thing to do.
So faith doesn't mean when you, even I don't see, I'll believe. Yeah.
No, it doesn't.
Is it?
Go ahead.
Yeah. Is it? Yeah. Is it?
No, I don't think that faith needs to be blind. You can trust in something on the basis of good reasons. I think faith is trusting in that which you have good reason to think is true. Faith is trusting in that which you have good reason to think is true. And I would say that that's the case for the Christian God.
I see. So faith is the act of trusting, and that's the point of faith.
Yes,
Yeah,
that is right.
So,
faith is not an epistemological category, a way of knowing something in the absence of evidence. It is trusting something or committing oneself to something, and that's perfectly consistent with doing it on the basis of good evidence.
Yeah, I think that's a good point. Faith is not an epistemological position. Yeah, it's really wonderful to hear that. So when you faith is something that makes sense, is it something that is being argued? If so, what is a good argument, and what are the forms you think? Maybe deductive or inductive, or the others?
Yeah. I personally don't think that it's all that important how you formulate your argument, whether you formulate it inductively or deductively or abductively. It seems to me that however it's formulated, what you want to do is to present arguments that logically imply their conclusions and are based on premises which are well supported by the evidence. And I typically give deductive arguments, but that's simply because they're easy to understand and easy to memorize. Students or lay people readily grasp these simple deductive arguments, which are stated in the form of logical premises that follow one. The conclusion follows from the premises deductively.
Okay, I got it. So let's go to your arguments in your books. Yeah. First argument. You claim that without God, life would be absurd. Why is it? Some time ago, we had the opportunity to interview Stephen Lau, and he said that it doesn't matter, that it doesn't matter at all. For him, even the existence of God will not make our life meaningful, as if the only reason that you live is so that you get a gift from God. What is your response?
Yeah. Well, when Stephen says that it doesn't matter if it doesn't matter, all he's expressing there is his apathy or indifference to the existential question of the meaning in life. It in no way shows that life is meaningless or that if God exists, life would not be meaningful. He's just saying he doesn't care. And that to me is just an expression of his personal opinion. He has the right to care about whatever he wants, but that does nothing to show that this isn't an important question. I myself have been deeply influenced by existentialist philosophers like Jean-Paul Sartre, who argue that if God does not exist, then life is absurd. It means that our lives are doomed to end in death, and that therefore nothing we do has any ultimate meaning. Without God, there are no ultimate values in life. They're just the fabrications of human consciousness or else spin-offs of the bioevolutionary process. And there is no purpose for which we exist, because everything is going to end the same way, in the heat death of the universe, with the extinction of the human race and indeed of the universe as a whole. So I think law puts it right. If God doesn't exist, nothing matters. Nothing ultimately matters. It's meaningless, valueless, and purposeless. And I think it matters enormously if it matters. I don't think anyone can live consistently as though life doesn't matter. No one can live a happy and consistent life with that kind of atheistic framework. And therefore, I think it's absolutely imperative that we go back to square one and say, well, wait a minute, maybe there is a God who loves me, who has created me for a purpose, who is the source of absolute moral values and love, and whom to know is to have tremendous meaning and significance. So I think that theism really, really makes an enormous difference, and that therefore this is a vital question that we should not be apathetic about.
I see. Okay, that's interesting. And there's some interesting questions also. Does when we think that life is only about as if when we think that when we live meaningfully because the existence of God, doesn't mean that we only live so that we get a gift from God?
No, not at all. I mean, what I'm saying is that if God exists, then the atheist's life is meaningful, as well as my life. I'm not talking about subjective meaning. I'm talking about objective meaning. So if God exists, Stephen Law's life is pregnant with meaning. It's very meaningful. Unfortunately, he's ignoring the foundation and source of that meaning, and therefore his life could very well go off course and not realize the purpose for which he was created and what God has in mind for him, because he's choosing to ignore God. But if God exists, his life is meaningful, as is mine. On the other hand, if atheism is true, if there is no God, then my life is meaningless. Even though I'm trying to live it in what I perceive to be a meaningful way, it would all be illusory. It would be a subjective illusion if atheism is true. So if God doesn't exist, it's not just Stephen Law's life that is meaningless, it's my life that is meaningless as well, despite my subjective illusion to the contrary.
Okay, thank you. I think it's really clear. Now I want to go for the other arguments, Dr. Craig. You give us a lot of arguments, but I think there are at least 4 arguments that we need to hear from you. Those are ontological arguments, teleological argument, moral argument, and cosmological argument. Can you explain in brief each of the arguments, and could you specifically choose the best argument you think for the existence of God?
All right, well then let's start with the last one you mentioned, the cosmological argument, which is my favorite. This can be very simply formulated. Whatever begins to exist has a cause. The universe began to exist. Therefore, the universe has a cause. And once you've arrived at that conclusion, you can do a conceptual analysis of what it is to be a cause of the universe. And some very striking and theologically significant properties of this first uncaused cause fall out of such an analysis. I think that it shows the existence of a first uncaused, beginningless, immaterial, spaceless, timeless, enormously powerful, personal creator of the universe. So that would be, in a nutshell, the cosmological argument.
There's some interesting thing I hear from Roger Penrose. He just won the Nobel Prize. I think yesterday. Roger Penrose, he said that maybe there's something before the Big Bang. What do you think about his statement, Roger Penrose statement? I think it's some kind that there's some Big Bang and then Big Crunch, Big Bang and then Big Crunch. What do you think about
it's not that simple?
That perspective?
Yeah, what Penrose is proposing is not the old oscillating model where the universe is like an accordion which expands and then contracts and then re-expands. His so-called conformal cyclical cosmology is a really maverick mathematical model of the universe, which requires a physics that doesn't exist. It contradicts the known physics. It would require an alien physics, so to speak. And therefore, this model has not generated any following among contemporary cosmologists today. One very prominent cosmologist wrote to me personally that he says Penrose's conformal cyclical cosmological model isn't really even taken seriously by cosmologists today.
I see. So even if he won the Nobel Prize.
Well, what I want to ask you, I haven't seen the news release. What did he get the Nobel Prize for? I very much doubt it was for his conformal cyclical model, because that's never been confirmed. It operates according to an alien physics. It must be on the basis of some of his earlier work.
It's not for his Big Bang cyclical model. It's not for his
that's
model.
what I suspect. I mean, he's one of the greatest astrophysicists of all time, and it's wonderful that he got this well-deserved award.
Yeah, but for the different, because of the black hole, if I'm not wrong.
Yeah, okay, very good.
Yeah. Okay, so even if he won the Nobel Prize, we couldn't believe his cyclical model, that which for the scientific community is not taken seriously, if I'm not wrong. Yeah,
that's correct.
Okay, nice. It gives me some relief. Okay. What about the other arguments, Dr. Craig?
Well, we mentioned the teleological argument, and the current form of the teleological argument is not based upon the design that seems evident in biological organisms like the eye. Rather, it is based upon what's called the fine-tuning of the universe. Scientists have discovered that from its very inception, the Big Bang was calibrated to a degree of precision and delicacy that literally defy human comprehension, so that intelligent, embodied life forms could evolve in our universe. And so the argument would go like this: the fine-tuning of the universe is due to either physical necessity, chance, or design. It is not due to chance or physical necessity, therefore it is due to design. So this argument will give you a supremely intelligent designer and creator of the universe and its natural laws.
It's relating to the anthropic principle.
Mhm.
Is it?
Yes.
The theological.
Yes, that would be where the debate is most heated today. In order to defend the hypothesis of chance as the best explanation for the fine tuning, theorists have been forced to postulate a kind of world ensemble of universes, other universes which are undetectable by us, but which exist out there, forming a kind of multiverse of which our universe is just one member. And the idea is that if these universes comprising this world ensemble of universes is randomly ordered in its constants and quantities, then finely tuned universes will appear by chance somewhere in the ensemble. And lo and behold, lucky us, we happen to be one such universe. And this is where the debate really lies today, is between the multiverse and the design hypothesis. And interestingly enough, and appropriately enough, Roger Penrose has raised perhaps the most potent objections to using the multiverse as a means of explaining away fine tuning. He has lodged objections to the multiverse hypothesis that are extremely difficult to avoid and which make it a less plausible explanation of the fine tuning than design.
I see. And some people say that multiverse is not physics but metaphysics.
Well, yes, and many cosmologists say that too. Many of them complain that this isn't really science, it's metaphysics. And it is metaphysical, that's true. But it is it's a kind of, well, what Alex Vilenkin, a great cosmologist, called metaphysical cosmology. He says, what I do is metaphysical cosmology. It's kind of a combination of science and metaphysics.
I see. So yeah. Okay. I hope there's no other questions from Amadea, or there's another person here. Romo Albertus Johnny. Any questions from the other? Okay, I think it's clear. Okay.
Yeah.
Romo Johnny, any questions regarding the cosmological arguments?
Well, I don't have any particular question, but I just want to say thank you for Dr. Craig for your generous your generosity to come and to talk about these important arguments. I do really appreciate your kindness.
Thank you.
Thank you. That's all. That's all I want to say.
Yeah, my pleasure. Since I haven't been able to visit Indonesia personally, this is the second best thing.
I'm a big fan of you, Dr. Craig.
Okay, so I will jump up to the other questions, Dr. Craig. Yeah. So the other arguments, maybe let's go to the moral arguments.
All right.
Yeah. What about moral arguments, Dr. Craig?
The moral argument can also be very simply formulated. If God does not exist, then objective moral values and duties do not exist. Now, it's important to understand that by objective moral values and duties, I mean moral values and duties that are binding and valid independently of whether anybody believes in them or not. Certainly, you can have subjective moral values and duties, but if God does not exist, it's extraordinarily difficult to see how there can be objective moral values and duties. Premise 2 is, but objective moral values and duties do exist. In moral experience, we encounter a realm of moral values and duties that impose themselves upon us. Some things are truly evil, and other things are truly good. And from those two premises, it follows logically and necessarily that therefore God exists.
Okay. But some people, like maybe Sam Harris, or a lot of scientists out there would like to say that the objective meaning of the objective morality could only get from the evolutionary theory. I mean, evolutionary process. What about that statement?
Well-
And that's make objective morality is a bit problematic. What do you think about it?
Well, now that's not Sam Harris's view. Sam
Okay.
Harris's view is that the flourishing of sentient life is the basis of objective moral values, and that therefore we have duties to promote the flourishing of sentient life. And my objection to that would be that on an evolutionary process, there's absolutely no reason to think that the flourishing of sentient life is morally good or that we have a duty to promote it. On the evolutionary view, moral values and duties are just the blind spin-offs of the biological evolutionary process. Organisms that function well in social groups, that develop altruistic behavior, will have a better chance in the struggle for survival than organisms that do not. But there's nothing about that that makes these organisms morally valuable or the duties they sense objectively binding. If you were to rerun the film of human evolution and start over again, a very different creature with a very different sort of moral system might have evolved. And it would be presumptuous for us to say, well, they're wrong and we're right. In that case, it seems to me that neither one of them has objective moral values and duties. It's just what is conducive to survival of the fittest.
I see. So the existence of God is really fundamental for give us the meaning of objective morality.
It's absolutely fundamental for objective morality to exist. It's not fundamental for the meaning of objective morality. We can understand what it means to say that the Holocaust was objectively wrong, whether you believe in God or not. We can understand the meaning of moral terms, but I do not see on atheism any ground for saying that objective moral values or duties exist.
Okay, I think that's really clear for the other participants. Roma Albertus, if there's any questions, please ask at the end of these discussions. So I want to move for another issues, Dr. Craig. I think it's really clear for the 4 arguments. I want to move to the contemporary issues, and I think it's still ongoing discussions between philosophers and theologians. That is Giles Kallenberg, divine hiddenness. I think it is really strong and at least compelling arguments, not only because of the premises, but because how it is oftentimes so resonated with a lot of people. Like, I want to believe on God, but I couldn't. The non-resistant atheist. If God is really there, why doesn't he just show a really compelling arguments? I mean, why he should be hidden? What your response for the issues of divine hiddenness?
I've written on this a bit in my book, Philosophical Foundations for a Christian Worldview. And I have a couple of responses to this challenge from the hiddenness of God. First of all, the argument presupposes that God's existence is hidden. People like Schellenberg don't think there are good arguments for God's existence. But I do. I think that on the basis of the beginning of the universe, the fine-tuning of the universe for intelligent life, the existence of a realm of objective moral values and duties, the applicability of mathematics to the physical world, and the historical person and resurrection of Jesus of Nazareth give us abundant evidence for the existence of God, so that God's existence is not hidden. Now, of course, it's true that God could provide more evidence of his existence. He could have written his name in the stars or put a neon cross in the sky saying Jesus saves. But what we need to understand is that God's purpose is not to just get people to believe that he exists. Really, that's almost a matter of indifference to God. He doesn't want to just get people to add another item to their ontological inventory of things. Rather, he wants to draw people into a personal, loving relationship with himself. And it may well be the case that in a world in which God's existence is as obvious as the nose on your face, that no more people would come into that sort of a loving personal relationship with God than in the actual world. In a world in which there was a neon cross in the sky or God wrote his name in the stars, people might actually come to resent God's effrontery in broadcasting his existence so blatantly. When you look at the Old Testament Israelites experienced God's reality through miracles and mighty signs and wonders. But did that produce heart change in the people? Not at all. Israel fell into apostasy with tiresome repetitiveness. So getting people just to believe that he exists is not enough. God wants to build a love relationship with us. And it may well be, I think it is probably the case, that the process of seeking God, of striving for him, of reaching out for him in humility and spiritual hunger and thirst is something that is very conducive to building that kind of personal relationship. And the last thing I would say is this. I think that God has what is called middle knowledge. That is to say, he knows exactly what evidence would be sufficient for every human being to make a free and rational decision to believe in him or not. And I don't think God is going to allow any person to live at a time in history or to die before he has been given sufficient evidence to make that sort of personal decision to believe in God. So given a God endowed with middle knowledge, I think we can trust that God has created a world in which every person is given sufficient evidence to believe in God if his heart is so disposed.
So the point of believing is not really to know the evidence, but also the process of striving at, the process of relationship, the process of maturity, if I may say. So yeah, that's the point that you think that Schellenberg missed.
Yes, I think that's correct. Paul Moser is a philosopher who has emphasized this personal element very strongly, and the need for searching for God, for reaching out for him in humility, coming to God on his terms and not in human pride, folding our hands and saying, all right, God, convince me if you can. That's not the type of heart attitude that is conducive to finding the knowledge of God.
I see. Well, yeah, it's really wholesome to hear that. Thank you, Dr. Craig. I think it's helping a lot of people who think that, I want to see some evidences. That's not the attitude that, I think good for regarding the knowledge to know God.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. Thank you. And maybe this is the last questions from me, but maybe there's another questions. 7. I asked Stephen Lau, why should someone be a humanist? And I also want to ask you, why should someone consider to be a theist? And maybe you could share some of your experience.
Yeah. Well, I find this an odd question. I'm often asked that. Why should I be a Christian theist? And my answer is very simple, because it's true. If it's true, then you should believe in it, right? And so that's the bottom line. It is true that God exists, that he's revealed himself in the person of Jesus of Nazareth and authenticated his claims by raising him from the dead, and that therefore you can come into an eternal personal love relationship with the creator of the universe. So what's not to like? I would say this is true, and therefore as a rational person, you ought to believe in it. And on the personal level, since you asked, this has changed my life. I was a non-Christian for many years, and I experienced the despair and the darkness that the existentialist philosophers speak of. And when I found Christ and he came into my life and turned it upside down, it filled my life with a meaning and significance that has changed me completely. Many people will say, well, what difference does it make being a Christian? And they'll say, well, the joy it gives, or the peace of mind that you have, or the hope. But for me, I have to say, the difference is made is meaning. Being able to get up every day in the morning and know that what I do today really matters, that my life has an eternal significance. To me, that is the greatest thing of all.
I see. Thanks a lot, Dr. Craig. It's really great to hear that. I think that's the last questions that I would like to give. I think that will be connected with the other questions. What do you think about inherited religion? Because in Indonesia, we believe in God just because inherited by family and don't feel God personally.
Well, I don't want to hurt anybody's feelings, but I think inherited religion is really stupid. It's to sacrifice your intellect and not think for yourself. I mean, this is a kind of attitude, honestly, that in Nazi Germany led to thousands of Hitler youth. Young men and girls joined the Hitler youth and Nazism. Why? Because that's how they were raised. They didn't think for themselves. It's the kind of attitude that led to Afrikaner apartheid and racism in South Africa. We've got to think for ourselves and not just mindlessly absorb the traditions we were raised in.
I see. Thanks a lot. One of my friends talked about inherited religion in her undergraduate thesis, I think. So I'll let the other participants. Are there any questions, Romo Albertus or John even?
Well, I was wondering whether beyond the truth of our faith, our Christian faith, I mean, is there any chance to build a real interfaith dialogue? What do you think about this issue, Dr. Craig?
Oh, yeah, I think that's very, very possible, especially in this day and age where, in the West at least, the predominant threat to religious belief is from secularism, those who would expel religion from the public square. And in the fight against secularism, Muslims and Christians and Jews and Mormons and Buddhists and others can all unite in saying, no, you must not abridge our right to freedom of religious expression. And so certainly there's grounds for cooperation as well as dialogue on many important questions.
Yeah, I do agree with you.
Dr. Craig, thank you so much. I actually have one question that I think is relevant in the context of bigger Christianity in the world. So one major critique, I think, with respect to your apologetical approach is the way that Catholic apologists and similar sympathists will say that you don't hold to the classical theism or the metaphysics of classical theism. And of course, you know, and I think you're familiar with this. And so there say that, you know,
Yes.
you start with the assumption that God is not the pure actuality and all the like. And so I guess just bringing it to the point, my question is really, do you think that you're offering a metaphysics underlying your conception of the being of God that is different from maybe the majority of Christian tradition, at least in the first 1,000 years, perhaps? And B, do you think that your concept, your metaphysics is still very much different compared to the other theologians at the moment working on the question of what is the being of God, which a lot of people still refer to the Thomistic view? I don't know if my question is clear enough, but thank you so much.
It's very clear. And what we need to understand is that the Thomistic conception of God, that is to say, the conception of God that follows from the work of Thomas Aquinas, the great medieval theologian, is a small minority, both historically in the Christian church and especially on the contemporary scene. So I stand within the wide majority view in rejecting the Thomistic conception of God. And I would just correct one thing you say. I don't begin with that assumption. That is a conclusion. I was trained under a Thomist, and I just was not convinced by the Thomistic arguments for God's metaphysical simplicity and pure actuality. It seems to me, in fact, that it's incoherent. So I stand with the wide majority of theists, both classically and on the contemporary scene, in not being a Thomist.
One more question very related to this, though. You have a book based on your dissertation called The Cosmological Argument from Plato to Leibniz. And I think within that book, you set out this narrative that the Thomistic view of God is actually inherited from the Muslim philosophers who were studying Aristotle. And so I would, and I think this is a major point, that not only do you think it's not the majority, but you also think that the background is not even rooted in the pure Christian tradition. So I was wondering, maybe the short question that I want to ask is, do you still believe in this narrative that actually the Thomistic view of God is inherently a Muslim, or it's not inherently, sorry, but in this narrative that it actually had a Muslim origin? And second, how do you think that Muslim origin could transport to Thomas Aquinas, which was definitely a very long stretch?
Well, now let me make very clear that I am not committing a genetic fallacy here. That is to say, trying to invalidate a point of view by showing how it originated historically. I'm just trying to give a historical account of the doctrine. And the roots of the doctrine lie not in Muslim philosophy. The Muslim philosophers got it from the ancient Greek Neoplatonists. It really originates in Neoplatonism and Plotinus and Proclus, who thought of God as the one, an undifferentiated unity, absolutely simple. And for these medieval theologians like Aquinas, they thought that these works by Plotinus had been written by Aristotle. They didn't realize that they were actually reading Neoplatonist philosophy. They thought it was Aristotle. And so they tried to combine Aristotle with this Neoplatonic philosophy of Plotinus and Proclus. Well, now we know better. And I think that this really derouted Christian theology into a dead end and a false view of God.
Wow. So it is, in fact, even from the Muslim perspective, it had an origin that was not also in the Muslim tradition.
Right, that's right. Yeah, this doesn't originate in either the Bible or in the Quran. It comes from Neoplatonism.
And it also had a lot of impact on the Christian tradition as well.
Oh, yes. Yeah. I mean, Thomas Aquinas was canonized, so to speak, as the premier theologian of the Roman Catholic Church. Now, that doesn't mean that very many Roman Catholics today are Thomists, but at least he holds this honorific position.
Wow, thank you so much.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. Okay, thank you, John, for the questions. Yeah, for your information, John is someone who's struggling first with the questions of why is people going to hell, and he find your Molinist account of freedom, etc., is really helpful for him.
Good.
Yeah,
I
is it
sure
right, John?
do.
Yeah, that's true. Do you know Jonathan Thompson?
Yes, very well.
I am one of his friends.
Oh, wonderful. I just was emailing with him last night, in fact. Yeah, he's in my defenders class.
Yeah, he told me about him in Georgia right now.
Oh, yeah, great guy.
Amazing.
Well, I need to take my leave of you now, if I may, but I'm grateful to have had the opportunity to converse with you folks.
Thank you so much.
We're
Dr.
really
Craig.
sorry for the inconvenience. Yeah, thank you, Dr. Craig.
Thank you so
Certainly.
much. That was great.
Yeah, I hope there's another opportunity for us to have a talk with you. Hopefully, Dr. Craig.
Okay. Well, thank you very much.
Yeah.
Send my regards.
Thank you
to
very
Jonathan.
much, Dr. Craig.
Okay. Have a good day.
You too.
Thank
Bye.
you, Dr. Craig.
Bye.
Guys, you are so amazing. How could you invite such a big philosopher like Dr. Craig? It still impresses me. I'm like, wow. Nice meeting you,
Beruntung
John.
Romo.
Sorry?
Nice meeting you, John. My name is
Oh,
Johnny
yeah,
too. Yeah.
Oh, dari mana? Where are you from?